Okay, good morning.
Amen.
It's great to see everybody. Happy Mother's Day.
Amen.
And Mother's job is never done, as we witnessed just now, even while sharing communion. Many kids have the experience, you know, doing something goofy and then, hey, mom, watch this. And for good or bad, moms always turn to watch them. But sometimes, moms themselves wonder if she is ever seen. Because there are points in a mother's life where they begin to wonder if they could be invisible. I read a article written by a mom entitled "I Am Invisible." I read a portion of it. She says it all begins to make sense. The blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will just walk into the room while I'm on the phone and ask to be taken to the store. And inside I'm thinking, can't you see? I'm on the phone. Obviously not. No one can see if I'm on the phone, or cooking, or sweeping the floor, or even standing on my head in the corner. Because no one see me at all. I am invisible. Some days I'm just a pair of hands. Nothing more. Mom, can you fix this? Can you tie that? Can you open this? Some days I'm not even a pair of hands. I'm not even a human being. I'm a clock. When the kids ask, Mom, what time is it? I'm a guide. What number is this D channel? I was certain that these were the hands that once held books and eyes that studied history and a mind that graduated, but now they've all disappeared into the peanut butter, never to be seen again. So I don't know if you ever felt this way as a mom. I've certainly, I'm sure we can relate. I think dads, Tony came up to remind me that fathers are part-time moms too. Maybe it's just Tony, huh? But today we're going to look at the passage in Genesis 16 at the relationship of a mother and a child and see if there can be some truth that can be relevant and helpful for all of us, young, old, mothers, fathers, children alike, and help us spiritually this morning. Genesis 16. I don't have everything up here, but we read from verses 1 through 15. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abraham agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. And Sarai said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. It's quite convenient, huh? I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Verse 6. Your slave is in your hands, Abraham said. Not much better. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the Lord, that is why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abraham gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. You know, Hagar is an immigrant. She's a foreigner from Egypt. She has no sense of belonging. She's running away from a household where her body has been used to produce offspring for an infertile couple. She basically is a product. And like many slaves, Hagar was mistreated. She's in this system where She has no dignity, no freedom, no rights. You talk about feeling invisible. She is referred, if you read the passage to by Abraham and Sarai as the maid or the Egyptian. They don't even name her, And in fact, every time that Abraham and Sarah talks about her, they don't name her. She could be referred to as the Egyptian, the slave, the maid. They probably never saw her as a real person. She was there to serve a purpose. And when she ran away, they probably might not even have noticed she's not in the household anymore. So maybe Hagar doesn't know what she wants. But it seems like she's clear about what she doesn't want. She doesn't want to be treated this way anymore. And she doesn't know what her greatest need was until she met God in the desert. And she names him in verse 13, El Roy, the God who sees. What name would you give God if you had a chance to meet him and name him? Would you call him the God who loves, the God of second chances, the God who forgives, the God who guides, the God who comforts, the God who rights the wrongs? What names we give God says as much about our need as it would about the character of God, because it is in our deepest need that we encounter God. At the deepest point of whatever we need from God, that's where we encounter him. Hagar, who might have been insignificant and felt misunderstood, she actually is quite significant. She has the longest recorded conversation of any woman and almost of any man in the whole of the Old Testament with God. No one spoke this long to God. Hagar was one of them. And up to this point, God has revealed himself and given himself names. Elohim, the creator, Yahweh, the covenant maker, and El Shaddai, the Almighty. He reveals himself and names himself to people. This Egyptian maid is the only person in the Bible that gives God a name. And God allows it now and records it. Isn't that awesome? Instead of the majestic names of God, Hagar needed an intimate, personal God. I have now seen the God who sees me, Hagar declares. So what difference does it make? We all have a fundamental need to be seen. Someone once said, you really don't know. Of course, in Psalms 139, the psalmist says, you saw me before I was born. God saw us before anyone else did. He envisaged us into being, and once he envisaged us and created us, he watched over us, both us humans and all of his creation. God sees us, and there's significance in each of us. No one is less or more important than the other person. To be seen is to feel I matter, to feel safe, to be understood, but it's also to be free. To be free because when we are under the loving gaze of our Heavenly Father, little else matters. And I want to remind us this passage in 2 Samuel 6, when King David is bringing the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. David the king, whom many people look up to, he only looked up to one being, and that's God. David lived his life before the audience of one. What God thinks about him matters more than anybody else. And when he brought the ark back to Jerusalem, because he knew how much it thrilled God, he danced for joy. So we read quickly here, verse 16 and verses 20 to 22. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. Michal, his wife. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Verse 20, when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of the slave girls of his servants as any vulgar fellow would. David said to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. You know, there's kind of a lot of sarcasm going here. You know? Wife to husband, husband back to wife, and then kind of, slinging at each other. But David, he's saying basically, I don't really care what the crowd thinks. I don't mind what the slave girls think even. Or the slave girls of the slave girls. I don't really care. I don't care what you, my wife, think. I don't care. Now, that's not a license to go, I want to do anything I want to. That's not what I'm saying here, right? Because all he cares about is God. He doesn't even think about what he thinks of himself, if that makes sense. He thinks about what God cares. He surrenders what is said about him or thought about him to God. Some of us may feel, well, he's the king. Does he really have to care about what people think? You think better than me. Off with his head, But I wager to say that whether in high positions or low or no positions, generally people care about what others think of them and say about them. About me, about us, right? I don't care what you say about him. I care about what you say about me. Like that. We care about ourselves, basically. And so that's why people in positions of influence are tempted to control narratives out of fear of what others think. Coach Niels Borman, he talks about why it's tempting to control narratives. And when people give up controlling narratives, there are disadvantages they are caused to bear. And they are less successes in terms of outward measurables in business like fame and money and influence. These things rely on putting up a certain front to the audience through having a say in the narrative. If you give up control, you'll be less popular. Popularity will likely go down, just like King David. He ends up not able to please anyone or everyone. There'll be more opposition, more headwind. Because generally, everybody cares about what people think. When one decides to give out this control, I don't want to, quote unquote, play the game. I don't want to be in this anymore. We are going against established culture. And in the case of King David, his wife Michal looked down on him with disdain. That's not the way a king of God's people should behave. Because that's culturally, there's a certain mold that a king is supposed to fit. And David is not fitting that mold. When someone chooses to give up the narrative and trust God, don't be surprised. It may even be perceived as being spiritually lukewarm or weak. Doing what is countercultural results in opposition and headwind. But when we realize that if you carry with us, God sees me and I'm significant and I don't really need to worry about what others think, there are advantages. If you give up control, you don't really care what people say and do in front of you or behind your back or beside you. There's great freedom. The moment we stop controlling the narrative, we don't have to keep track about what we said, to who, when, so that we avoid contradicting ourselves. That takes up a lot of mental space. It takes up a lot of mental bandwidth, and we find ourselves really can't do anything else. And then the other advantage, obviously, is real connections. Because we present who we are to God as to others. We present who we are to others as to God. We're the same. We are therefore not afraid to show our limitations and weakness. And we all do. We all have weaknesses, right? Uh, and then you feel that you'll find in time that we will be joined by like-minded individuals who share these same values. Right? Yeah, we worry about what God thinks. And that's the most important thing. And we find, I suppose one last thing is peace. There's going to be peace, because you know, you understand what I'm saying, right? For Hagar, once she was assured that God sees her, that she's cherished, and that her child will be blessed, it gave her enough courage to go back to live with Abraham and Sarai. And she went back and lived with them for a long time. And that's showing faith, feelings not completely resolved, it comes out, but God. At the end, when God make things clear, then I know it's not me, it's God. Well, Hagar went back to live with them, and her son grew up, and things became unbearable again. So she left. One more time. Turn to Genesis 21. Verses 8 through 12. The child, meaning Isaac, now is the other child. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham was mocking. So she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son." You see, she never called her by name. For that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Verse 11, the matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. Which son is he referring to? We don't know. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he's your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And she sat there and she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar?" And God says what angels typically say when they appear to men: "Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. At this point, it's many years. Abraham was 86 when he had Ishmael. And Isaac was born to him when he was 99, something like 100. Okay, whatever. It's a long time. Hagar went back and lived with the family for 14, 15 years. Still not called by name, Still not called by name. But she could endure because God sees me. And that's enough. And Ishmael is the son born to Abraham out of total desperation and little faith. Just with the slave woman, have a child. Isaac is the child born to Abraham because of God's promises and nothing else. So on the day that the child was weaned, and studies say that Hebrew children are weaned between 3 years old and 9 years old, which means that At this point, Ishmael is a teenager, you know. It's not a baby, he's a teenager. So there's all this celebration going on, not just happy laughter, but there was another laughter that Sarah took offense at next on Sarah. Perhaps and during the Isaac's party, she saw something that made her blood boil. But before you know it, she ran up to Abraham and screamed at her husband, "Get that woman and her son out of my household!" Neither she or anyone else in these verses use Ishmael's name. He's just the boy, Hagar's son. And as I said earlier on, verse 11, Abraham is greatly distressed because this concerned his son. Which son? We like to assume it's Isaac, you know. It could also mean he's greatly concerned because Ishmael is his son for the last 15 years, you know. Because he caused so much tension in the household, he might be concerned too. But he wasn't concerned very long. Because next thing he did, he wanted to wash his hands off this whole matter. Oh, okay, go. Basically, go and die, you know. He sent him to the desert to die. There's nothing out there. And at this point, Abraham doesn't know it yet. But in the following chapter, God is going to ask him to sacrifice Isaac. Is that ironic? Maybe this chapter he thought, I sent one to die, I still got another one. Maybe, I don't know. Next chapter, no, you sacrifice the son Isaac. Wow. What do we say? Bank chairs, you know. Unbelievable. When is it going to ever end? How many sons I have? 2. One by one, gone. But at this point, he gave them water, sent them out. It's kind of like a foreshadow of what's going to happen in the next chapter. Okay, I'll talk about it in a while bit more. But God knows exactly what to do. In the midst of all that suffering, in the midst of all that crying, Hagar, when she's out in the desert, she realized that there's no water. The son will die. She will die. She left the son under a sliver of shade in the sweltering heat of the desert wilderness. She went away a bow shot. I don't know how far you can shoot a bow, you know, I suppose 30, 40 meters. And then she just sat there, she cried, sobbing. You know, the Bible doesn't even say that Ishmael or Hagar prayed. But like many times in the Old Testament, when people cry out, God hears. God hears them. In fact, Ishmael means he hears. God hears. So he's all alone. God hears. Brothers and sisters, sometimes when we feel like no one is listening, we're all alone, and our loved one is suffering, and we cannot bear our own suffering, maybe we cannot bear somebody else's suffering, and then we find all these challenges. Where is God? Suddenly, I think Ishmael can relate. His stepmother Sarah cannot stand him. His father Abraham cannot tahan him. His mother has walked away from him. I mean, where's anybody? But when no one else seems to be there, God is. God is listening. You know, though Hagar knows that God is the one who sees, she forgot. In fact, this is the second time she's wandering in the desert. And what did God do? Again, he says, don't be afraid. And when he finally reached out to her and opened her eyes, she saw a well that's always been there. And I think sometimes, brothers and sisters, that's how God works. You know, when we cry out to God, when finally God gives us a solution, somehow it's always been there. We just didn't. And the solution requires no effort, as I said, on our part. You know, ultimately, the story of Ishmael is a contrast with the story of Isaac. Both are Abraham's sons. One of the flesh, the other from promise. One brought joy, the other brought tension. God will bless both into a great nation. God told Abraham to prepare both to die. God intervened in both situations. God provided a way out that was already there for them. What does it all mean? You know, We can draw many spiritual lessons. I encourage you, if you're interested, you have the time, read about these accounts and draw your own conclusions. But I read some lessons that say Isaac and Ishmael represents the two sides in us, the flesh, the promise, and then we do battle within, because we're the son of the Father God, and that's one direction some people go. You read the book of Galatians. Galatians warns the Jews. You think you're saved because you're descendants of Abraham? Think again. It's the son of the promise that's chosen, not the son of the flesh, Don't place so much emphasis in your lineage to Abraham. Don't think you're saved. You go that direction. And suddenly you can think about Isaac being some kind of a foreshadow of Jesus Christ. Son of the Father, he has to be brought up to a high place to be sacrificed. Both are born miraculously. Many lessons. To me, the story is not about Ishmael or Isaac. It's not about Abraham or Sarah or Hagar. Not about who's sinful or who's righteous. Because all of them have glaring character flaws. The Bible's central character is, and always will be, God. This is about God's plan, about His faithfulness, about His righteousness. Whether we are chosen or few chosen, or we are abandoned or few abandoned or not, we are loved. God loves everyone. The way of God is love. This is about how tender and caring God is. It's about Him seeing and hearing each of us. This is the God who sees us amidst the messiness of life. Whether we are victims of abuse or pregnant teenagers with nowhere to turn, whether we have been disowned by family or we have given up hope on life, no matter what our situation is, let us never lose hope that this is a God, the same God who saw Hagar, He's a God who sees. And if we want to go down and sometimes think about point of view, everybody's got a point of view. Everybody's got pain. Hagar's got pain. Sarah got no pain, man. In her mind, she got a lot of pain, Abraham, don't marry more than one wife, You see? The guy's in a lot of pain. Who's got no pain? Ishmael got no pain. Isaac's got no. Everybody's got pain. Then in the end, is it about whose pain is greater? The pain is greater is more right? No, it's about God. That I surrender everything to God. God is the one. This mess. As someone said, we look forward to heaven because there's going to be rest. No more debate. No more debate. No more standing for our rights and this. No more. We look forward to that. And really, the heaven's life starts now. In the moment where we are close, we connected with God, it's a sliver of heaven. And we connect with God that way. And we're grateful because life is unpredictable. And can go.
Man, I certainly feel very blessed